start with a little bit of a story here. I'm going to tell you about two accidents. Basically, they are unrelated accidents. However, there's a common thread to today's discussion, so I thought I'd share it with you. I guess maybe a few of you might be wondering why I'm carrying around this cane and I have this nifty little scooter. Well, I'm actually recovering from a pedestrian accident. So, I practiced all the proper security risk management. I went to the intersection and I stopped and I crossed at the light. I waved to the driver. I was wearing bright clothes, and then out of nowhere, an SUV comes and I caught it out of the peripheral vision. I jumped at the last moment, but I was hit, and I landed about 2 car lengths away from where I was hit. And that was 15 months ago, so I'm still kind of walking around with this thing. The second accident happened a while ago, and recently walking through the airport, this book cover caught my eye. Does anybody know who this is? Quite a few people might know who this is. This is the late Vito Rizzuto, a well-known mafia boss. It reminds me, as I said, when I saw this book cover, of another accident. I was recovering from knee surgery at that time, and I was technically off sick, and I was asked to, I put my hand up and was asked to learn some pretty neat software when I was in the RCMP. And when I put my hand up, I ended up working on the case for Vito Rizzuto, and it was the largest offload operation by the Montreal Mafia at that time. It was 17 tons of hash and about $225 million. But sort of reflecting on the two accidents in my security experience, it kind of reinforced the fact that you can work hard, but you can't control everything. And secondly of all, you have to embrace every opportunity for learning. And there are some of the lessons that I kind of came out with that. But thank you for inviting me here today to talk to you. I've been very fortunate to have a very diverse career. I've been all the way from the high Arctic, stationed in a small Inuit community. I was the only police officer. There was, my nearest backup was jet by 4 hours, even if they had a jet. I've been on the red carpet in Hollywood with a security team guarding millions of dollars of jewelry being worn by the various celebrities that you see on the Oscars and the Emmys. I've been under transport trucks doing various security type initiatives. I've been working in, set up a global operations center that spanned 10 countries and multiple languages. So I've done a lot of very diverse things, and I'm very, very fortunate because I've taken all these opportunities and I've learned from them. So hopefully today I'm going to share a little bit of experience and some ideas about that together. So the topics for today, the mouse went. The topics for today, I'm going to talk about security and security, the business of security. I'm going to talk about enterprise security risk management, which is a concept. Some of you might be familiar with it. I'm going to talk a little bit about technology. I'm going to talk about the human potential of security professionals and just pose the question, are you ready for the future? So when you think of, quite often when people think of security, they automatically jump to the conclusion that it's about guards, guns, and gates. But that is passé. That's really not what security is about. And hopefully folks in this room are thinking along that same lines. It's a very outdated mode of thinking. Sure, we might need some of these security features, guards, guns, and gates occasionally, but it's not necessarily the entire picture. There's so much more, but the question is why? Well, welcome to Vulcan. This is a bit of a play on words from the term VUCA, which was coined by the U.S. Army College to talk about the Cold War in the 1950s. It described the situation that was happening at that time. Security and the world around us, we all know, is changing rapidly. And the security situation now, we're dealing with things that are volatile, uncertain. Learning is accelerated at a rate that we never expected. We have very complex issues that we're dealing with, sometimes very ambiguous situations, and our society and the velocity of that is requiring us now to do the security analysis and provide the information to our various organizations now. So security is not static. It's just as our world is not static, and it should not be thought of strictly in terms of physical security. And that's one of the main points that I want to talk about today. This concept requires bold thinking and also new approaches. So when we talk about the numbers, and I'm not going to get into a ton of numbers here, but there's a lot of studies out there, but a lot of them are based on the United States. We don't have a lot of good studies around the cost of overall security in Canada. Many of those are outdated. But we see that private and government security is increasing, it's growing. Private security in the United States is jumping at the rate of sometimes 20%, and that was one of the figures from last year. That trend towards increased spending is still happening today, and it's interesting that it's also moving towards private security going into non-critical roles in the public security field. Recently, I was invited to a national conference in Ottawa and on public-private partnerships, and we discussed these very issues. Excuse me. And there's a lot of situations now where security is now moving into the public sector. So for instance, in Montreal, they're testing a project whereby private security is actually complementing regular serving police officers at traffic accidents to, augment the services that are being offered, and also allow police officers to remain on more highly focused, high task items. This whole idea of security and the security changes, it offers terrific opportunities for Canadian technology and research, and that probably takes in many of you here that are in the room here for Canadian businessmen. But of course, the security person in me always asks, how are you going to protect that intellectual property? How are you going to screen your employees? Are you going to do the proper due diligence? How are you going to protect your sensitive information to make sure that it's not being diverted when it shouldn't be? So we all know what this looks like, the as-is state of security. It's sort of a business as usual. It ranges from apathy, which says, we know this is what we do, this is how we do it. It's always the way that we've done security. So, it seems good enough to us, so why change it? And then the scale tips as well to the level of arrogance. So that's, what do we do? What we do is actually better than anybody else. We employ the best people. We always have the best technology. Nobody can beat us, and we don't need your help. So you have that kind of dichotomy going on, that scale. As a security officer, as a security auditor rather, I've seen a lot of situations where security of an organization is in that mode, whether it be apathy or arrogance. And it's truly a slippery slope, because once they start going down that road, it poses a huge challenge. And this is especially true if your business interests are personal or classified information or in the area of national security. We don't have to look too far, and probably the folks in this room know even more about the various issues around hacking. We see the amounts of classified information that's being leaked, transcripts from the White House, all of that. And we all know that the hackers are out there, and the bigger they are, the harder they fall. So I think it's important that we recognize that maybe this as-is state of security is probably not where we need to go. So then we kind of get into, well, we'll practice good risk management. If we don't do anything wrong today, we don't do anything wrong tomorrow, we'll just rinse and repeat. We don't have to worry about it. We don't have to do any critical thinking about what we're actually doing. And that's a bit of a dangerous mindset. Where I'd like to focus in on is the business of security. And this is a concept or a philosophy that security actually becomes part of the inner workings of your organization or your business. Everything right from the frontline worker to the executive. It's the business of security is far more than that. It's actually tied to the organization's purpose and mission. So you want the security to enable the business to perform their mission. You want them to do more sales, to have more interactions with people, all these types of things. So you want to enable the business. Now, part of that is ESRM, which is Enterprise Security Risk Management. Some of you may have used that term or even used that process in terms of security software development. Does anyone use this process, ESRM, in security software development? Anybody? No? Okay. ASIS International, which is a global association for security management professionals, is supporting this theory through a number of education and publications and research in this area. But I'm going to get back more to ESRM in a moment. So let's talk a little bit more about the business of security. When I talk about security, I'm talking about the whole collective of functions. I'm talking about everything from physical to human to intellectual to tangible and intangible assets, including your brand, including your proprietary information. It's security issues around human resources and travel, information protections, and as I said before, brand management. So it starts with leadership at its core. And one of the things that I always talk about to people is it doesn't matter where you are in an organization. Everyone can be a leader in what they do and how they do it. And sometimes we get in this mindset of, oh, that's somebody else's job. But actually, it's our job. It's the people in this room. It's the people that are actually performing the various functions of security. It moves from leadership onto security intelligence of an organization, the organization's business or mission, their interests, and then finally to the national security interests, which ultimately is something we're all interested in, which is protecting the safety and security of Canadians, both home and abroad. And all of that is impacted by the cyber factor that's happening. And all these items on this diagram interplay and impact upon one another. So it's now about the business of security, how we must change it, how we must change how we're doing things. A key element of this is continuously balancing risk and costs, looking at connecting, making sure that connects to the business's purpose and its mission. But it's also about technology. What type of technology are we using? Are we using the right technology? Can this technology be exploited? And that spills into the third element, which is the human factor. The human factor can be both good or bad. It can. We have people that thrive in their roles, and then we also have the issue of insider threat. But we're continuously balancing and rebalancing these risks and costs and benefits. sometimes when we do risk and threat vulnerability assessments, sometimes those issues are staring us right in the face. Sometimes we don't even realize they're happening. I recently sat down with a company I was doing some work with in the construction, technology, and research field. And I was brought in to help on their workplace violence and looking at active shooter and helping them kind of put together some protections around that and a response to that. And during my interview with the chief legal officer, this is a global company, this is a pretty major company, I asked him about what is your competitive advantage? And he immediately answered, research. So I said, okay, what are you doing about the intellectual protection of that research? And his face kind of looked at me for a second, and I realized, okay, there are probably some things that he needs to think about in that whole area. But it's aside from the technology side, it's the human factor, and that can inspire you as well. It actually inspired me early on in my career. When I was a police officer, I didn't know much about private security. And I realized this, from my interactions. I knew, that's a good lock. Generally that looks like a pretty strong door. If somebody kicked it in, it would probably, give a little bit. But I didn't know a lot about the theory. So I went and I studied. I did a lot of study and research. I learned more about ASIS International. I studied and became a certified protection professional, which is a board certification in security management, similar to some of the designations that ISACA and ISC squared have, just in a different area. Later on, that became very important. I went to work for one of the world's most exclusive luxury jewelry companies. And I took this whole concept of business of security and embedded it in that program. And I had executive buy-in. I had a board sponsored policy that I introduced. We had a seat at the table as I said, as an executive. There were elements of the security program in all aspects of the organization, everything from HR to marketing to sales. And all of this was powered by a diverse, talented security team. And I made sure that they all came from different backgrounds. I didn't go after ex-police officers and ex-military. I went after a wide variety of people with diverse ideas, and I continue to this day, those are the type of people that I tried to hire. 550 employees, a 90-person security team, 10 countries, several $1 billion in assets and profit per year. And that worked very well. So back to enterprise security risk management. I could actually give a whole talk just on this alone, but I'm going to give you just an overview. ESRM is a philosophy and a management system that recognizes that security issues can't be stovepiped. It's a risk-based approach to holistically manage security-related risk in an organization. And it uses globally accepted and established risk principles, but it's through a collaborative model in an organization where individuals in the organization actually are controllers and are involved in this risk and the risk mitigations of that. It embraces all aspects of security management. Right from the physical to cyber to information security, loss protection, threat management, travel security, workplace violence, resilience, brand protection, and the list goes on. As a security professional, I've had to review all the possibilities when I deal with these high-profile issues. As I said, when you're responsible for $5-10 million worth of jewelry on the red carpet in Hollywood, you have to make sure that you have all your ducks in a row, or the insurance companies get very, very upset. And you don't want to have a black eye for your organization. And I'm sure the same thing applies in your world as well. You don't want a black eye on the reputation of your particular company. But you have to go through this enterprise security risk management steps. And I'll just briefly, as a highlight, I think hopefully you can see the wording on that, but the slides will be available. You have to first of all identify the security vulnerabilities and the risks to each asset. You have to prioritize that risk and also look at the risk, security risk relationship with each asset, and how does that play with the various team or the people responsible for that. You have to come up with a risk treatment plan, of course, and then you have to continually look at this and review it. You can't be static. You have to continually look at issues that are happening, whether they're geopolitical, whether they're societal, all of these types of things. You have to continue to look at that. If anyone is interested, I can provide you 2 papers from ASIS on this whole subject, more detail on the enterprise security risk management. So just have a word with me afterwards. When I talk about enterprise security risk management, sometimes people get confused and they say, oh, well, isn't that enterprise risk management? Well, actually, they're different. ERM, or enterprise risk management, is more associated with the financial side. It looks at accounts, it looks at the financial side of the business, credit risk, commodities, pricings, accounts, and that sort of thing. While we recognize that any disruption of to an organization, whether it be a profit or an interruption to the mission itself, we know that that's a bad thing. We don't want that to happen. But if someone has a bad trade, it doesn't necessarily put an employee in harm's way. It could be a huge branding issue, it could be a huge regulatory issue, but it might not be a physical harm issue to the individuals. ESRM is kind of different as well, in that it's not tied to a reporting or organizational structure. So there's actual collaboration happening across an organization. The collective security issues are reviewed and discussed, and the treatment plans, the risk treatment plans are discussed and all that. ESRM is not convergence either. It's not where physical security and information security work or become melded together in a different format. I worked in one high-profile organization, and I actually had a specific security information team that reported to me, and it was outside the CIO role. So the security information team was actually reporting to the CSO. And one of the roles of that particular group was to look at any proposed software changes that were happening within the organization, and they would conduct actual risk assessment on those changes, and they would come up in concert with the software developers and in concert with the IT department of a mitigation plan to kind of address that. And that was a very, very interesting model, and it worked very well, because sometimes it's difficult for the people that are in the security information stream to actually come out and say, hey, this IT thing, this particular software, maybe it's a little dodgy, or maybe we don't want to use this particular issue or particular type of software. So anyway, that whole process worked very well. For many organizations, enterprise security risk management is a maturing process. It involves cross-collaboration, analysis, and metrics, and those are very, very important. Maturity modeling is something you can use to grade your security department. You can actually use this model as well to grade your IT groups as well. The goal in maturity modeling is continuous improvement. How do you continuously improve and develop your program so you become a valued partner in your organization? So you start at the initial stage, down at the bottom left, and you work your way up to the top, which is the optimized stage. So you probably recognize maybe your security program in some of these areas. So at the initial stage, you're reactive, uncontrolled, unpredictable, and inconsistent. At the repeatable stage, it's generally characterized by very good, solid projects, but they're often reactive, and they sometimes have varied consistency. Then you move into the defined stage, where your security group is actually becoming more part of the organization. And then you move up to managed and measured, which is on KPIs, and then you look to the optimized stage, where you're actually, as I said, a valued partner. So the technology and human side, this is definitely part of the equation. Tech alone is not the standalone answer. We need technology and the human factor, and it's important to have that combination. I'm going to speak a little bit about that in a moment. We talk a little bit about the game changers that are happening for technology and human factor. All of these are things that you are all familiar with. One I want to point out, I talk about geochange. Geochange is anything from geopolitical issues right to climate change, which actually has an impact on security. And it's all about the change and the pace of change that's happening. So I've been fortunate to work alongside some pretty interesting techie people. Technical people. I am not a technical person. I know a little bit, only enough to be dangerous. But I've worked with some really interesting ones, and some of my colleagues are working on some very interesting things. And this is a few examples. One I kind of want to highlight a little bit about is a quantum polygraph, which is actually looking at deception and veracity of written material. And there's some interesting work being done on that. One of the video systems that I'm involved with was involved in the Boston Marathon bombing, where they analyzed over 300 hours of various video feeds, and then analyze those to identify the bomber along the way. So we talk about the human potential. This is the positive stuff, things that we'd like to talk about. I'd like to take the last few minutes to discuss this element of security. It's extremely important. I often ask to work with security teams and work on their team development. And so I'm asked a lot of questions in this area. As you can see from this slide, over 72% of professionals are either excited or confident about the future. But I also remind you, it's important to be your own career manager. It's important for all of us, whether you're a young professional or a seasoned professional, to take responsibility for your own development. And for the leaders in the room, it's important for you to pass that on and develop your team. That's one of your main responsibilities. Another kind of exciting area that I'm involved in the area of human potential is the Security Intelligence Leadership Program. This is about building a stronger security and intelligence community basically at the national security level. It's focusing in on executives and senior leaders in government, law enforcement, and special select organizations. I've had some pretty exciting work in this area because of the background and research that I've done over the last 4 years. So now, question. I'm asked this question a lot when I do a lot of talks. Do men and women lead differently? What do you think? Yes? Yeah? You think one does maybe better than the other, or is it a gender issue or not? Or is this a loaded question?
Different. It's just different.
Just different? Well, here's your answer. This is a study, a huge leadership study that was done, 7,200 senior leaders in a 360 format. It actually identified that women in this particular group led men in 11 categories. And it's you can see them right there at the top of the screen. Where men and women scored equally was on the quality of connection to the outside and innovation. And key development areas for women are about security, developing strategic perspective, and developing professional skills. So, there's some interesting results there. So for the folks that might be studying STEM technology or computers, this of course applies to you. And for the managers in the room, take note. So the human potential is about altitude. How do you get there from here, I should say. How do you prepare for your own career? I'm often asked about this subject, and I talk about pathfinding, I talk about professional development, much like we're doing here right now. It's interesting, recently ISACA and ASIS International have formed a joint initiative to work together, the cybersecurity side and the traditional security side. They're co-hosting the conferences for ISACA and ASIS International together in Dallas. Hopefully, if it's not flooded out by that time. One of the things that both offer is opportunity for certification. And I always stress this with the audience. Talking about certification, don't hesitate. Go and look at certification and try to develop yourself. I can speak really to the ASIS side. There's a lot of mentoring that we do in terms of women in security, and I also invite everyone in the audience to attend any of the ASIS chapter events in your particular cities. There's a great one here in Montreal. I'm based out of Ottawa. You're more than welcome to come to Ottawa anytime as well. We have a lot of events. I just remind everybody that look for those learning and networking opportunities. Get involved and pay it forward. Complacency and fear is often some of the things that hold us back. So don't get complacent, don't be fearful, just step out. And as I wrap up here and hopefully take a couple of questions, I'd like you to consider that, at least in my talk here, that security is more than physical security. It's more than that. I want people to think of business of security. I want them to think about the enterprise security risk management. Think about the issues around technology and the human factor. And above all, I want that we nurture that human potential, the human potential on our teams and the human potential of the folks in this audience. Work towards professionalization, certification, and have that continuous learning mindset. So thank you very much.